Hi, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Doyle. And there's some things that I've got to say today. Well, actually, continue saying. I think I'd like for us to pick up where we left off on our last conversation. We were talking about social media and the impact on society and the culture, and I think where we actually left off specifically was we were talking about that no one individual or no one person can fix or save the world from the negative things or the bad things that are going on, and that we individually can work in our area to in our lives in our space that we live in and influence to make things better and to improve them. There's only one being that I think we agree that is capable of saving, and that is the Christ figure that we talked about. And in that scenario, I think you had mentioned, made the comment that we have to become the Christ figure in our lives, right? Those that of us that embrace that thought and that belief of the Christ and the Christ figure, we have to be that, reflect that, and be that in our lives, in the spaces that we are. So we sort of become and are part of the greater whole of the Christ by doing so. And so collectively, I think as we together, the society and the community or the group or the peoples or whatever that embrace this and believe this and internalize this, if they act that way, then collectively we start making a difference. We move toward the perfection that the Christ represents, the Christ figure represents. So what does that mean? That can be daunting, or that can be overwhelming if you just an individual stops to think about it, and in fact you go, oh my gosh, how, I can't be and do and the thing that we have to stop and realize is, and this is coming from the Bible about what is called the Great Commission, in evangelical Christians, and it is interpreted and reinterpreted and in lots of different ways. But I think the scripture in English says, "Go ye therefore, making disciples and baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." I think if we peel that back a little bit and look at sort of a closer definition or a closer translation, would be "as you are going." At least that's how I perceive that. And so, what does that mean from an individual's perspective? We live our lives every day. We are going somewhere every day, right? And just getting into some sort of a metaphysical kind of thing about time moving. And even if we sit still, we're still moving. We're moving through time in some fashion. And so we're either doing something or not doing, not actively doing, but in that of itself, that is a doing, that is a going through. So I think people sometimes get overwhelmed by that thought too. They go, well, I can't go over here and do this, and I can't go over there and do that. But as we take the steps of daily life, as we interact with our close family members and the folks that we share a home with, and the people that we go to school or to work with or interact with in social circles and different kinds of groups that we participate in, we have the opportunity to expose and influence people and things in ways that can improve the state, right? And there's a lot of people that do this. That's their natural course. And so this isn't a new revelation. I mean, I'm kind of describing, I believe the way a lot of people live their lives day to day is they try to make it better whatever they encounter, they try to make it better. And as they go forward, what they leave behind is better. Now, not everybody does that. And so I think what we're experiencing now is in the world is a number of people that are getting more visibility and that aren't leaving things better. They're actually leaving a trail of destruction behind them, and with the idea to get heard. I mean, and I understand the desire to be heard if someone feels there's an injustice, but leaving destruction doesn't make things better. And I look at your shirt And I see that, the techie people will see there's no place like
I don't know if it's in
127.0.0.1.
frame, but if it, I'll pull it up into frame for a bit.
All the techie people know that represents home as a internet protocol address. That's the local PC that someone's working from. And the IP address, as it's called in short. That when we are in home, we most people don't destroy their own home. But when you think in terms of what your home is, it's not just the structure that you live within. It's the group of people and community that you live that is around where you live, I think. And I think it's a sad state when we have people that don't understand that they're harming their own home when they leave some destruction behind them. So, how do I personally internalize that? And I've spoken a lot in the past about my beliefs and my feelings and how that manifests itself in my day to day life in some respects. Well, one of the things is to try to always be better, to be kind, to encourage people, right? Because when people feel better about themselves, then they feel better about everyone around them, and then they have a more natural tendency to want to improve things around. We're in a unique time in history, I think, in that the things that are happening, out in society, they seem to not be following the typical logic that people would think in terms of, and I think Jordan, you may have mentioned in one of our past conversations about how social media is not reflecting reality; it is becoming reality. Right. And what that means from the standpoint of how we take that how we embrace that in a way that has a more positive outcome and not such of a path of destruction that it leaves. So, and I think one of the things that we've mentioned too about social media is it allows people to be insulated a little bit from the fear of confrontation, because there's a virtual barrier between what goes out and then the reaction that comes back, right? I mean, versus, if you were to insult someone face to face, it might come to some sort of physical altercation potentially, or at least some immediate response, even if it's verbal. So we have to figure out how to blend that virtual relationship and dialogue with the physical, right? Because that's where you live. You live in the physical. So, what are your thoughts on all that? I said kind of a mouthful here. That sort of came from the heart as well as from the psyche, but as much of it from the heart as anywhere else.
So I think that you said some important things and some things that I won't say disagree with at all. I would say that I take a different view of them maybe than you do. And I'm trying to figure out how to unpack it, because you did cover a lot of territory there. Maybe whatever occurs to me, I'll speak on. Maybe I'll start with one of the most recent things that you said, which was, about social media becoming reality. One of the things that I want to clarify with that point is that I don't think that it's changing human behavior. I think that it's revealing human behavior, and I think that not just revealing human behavior, it's enabling us to bring hidden thought patterns to the surface and see them in a way that they were there before, but we never saw them before. This is both good and bad, right? Because there's as many negative examples as there are of human behavior recently. There's also countless more. On balance, there just technically have to be, but I know that there are countless more positive interactions and things that we wouldn't see or know about otherwise. So I think I want to bring the levity and balance of, there is more good than bad from this, but we can't deny the bad. But the whole point of this allows us to understand more of the bad and address the bad directly head on, whereas before it would try to hide or just, operate in the shadows, so to speak. So I think that on the whole, social media, clearly it's a tool, but I think it ultimately will function as the great illuminator for humanity. In many ways, the same way that the printing press did, right? Because that allowed a lot of knowledge to spread very rapidly throughout the world, even. And that's the same sort of thing that's happening with the internet. But the reality is, the first 20, 30 years of the internet was a I don't know how to say it, but think about it at the printing press. Only people who could read could take advantage of books in the first 20, 30 years of the printing press. But then think about the next 30 years after that, when more people started to learn to read because of the availability of that. That's where we're at now with the internet. And social media represents kind of the first phase of all of humanity coming into knowledge and usage of the internet, in a very intentional manner, right? Not just I bumped up against this company's website because I saw the label that had the website on it or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that we're going to find that as we live with these technologies over the next couple, 3-4 decades, that once it gets to a saturation point of it is so obvious to everybody how everything works on the internet and in social media. And there's always going to be innovation, right? There's always going to be the pushing along the edge. But once we get to some sort of parity with and I said parity, not parody, parity with general broad social media usage, which we're rapidly approaching that. We're very, very close to that right now, I think. We're going to find that starting at that point, children born on that day and after are going to be different human beings than you and I are. I think that we're already starting to see some of that now with kids who are like 3 and 4, like already can manipulate work tablets, work computers, right. And it's like, what? It's wild, and not just that, but they can manipulate them in a way that allows them to explore and learn. And there's kids that are teaching themselves things that it's just, how can they even know this? And so that's really, that's fascinating to me. But I think what we're going to find, though, is that this whole conflict in behavior, ultimately, it's going to go one of two ways. We're going to resolve a lot of things that are really bad really rapidly, and we're going to continue to find some of those things that have hidden in the shadows for so long that we weren't even aware that are there. And I think that that's going to come to the surface, and that's going to process itself out. Or the other side of it is going to be that entrenched power structures are going to manipulate the frame of everything for as long as they can. They're going to for as long as they can, and manipulate the timeline of that illumination. I think what we're finding right now is that we are in that phase of the entrenched power structures manipulating that frame in a way that makes it look like human behavior in total is worse than it ever has been before, when in reality it's better than it ever has been before. And when in reality we're resolving conflicts faster than we have ever before. And when in reality everybody's more prosperous than they ever have been before. And not to say that there isn't poverty and there aren't things that need to be addressed. Absolutely there are, but that's precisely my point, is that this all of this is going to resolve that faster than it won't. I really truly believe this.
So what do you think? Yeah, it was a question because, I by my nature, I'm optimistic, right?
Yeah.
I always believe that there's another day brighter coming forward, coming, we're going toward it. But sometimes it's really difficult when one focuses like many people seem to be right now and on the negative that's going on. And I'm guilty of this, right? Of seeing, and I've minimized how much of the general media I watch, and I choose where I consume my information from a little more diligently than I might have in the past, because I want to be careful. I want to get facts and not the narrative, whatever the narrative is. And I'm not talking right, left, or otherwise. I'm just saying, just in general, all the people putting something out have an objective with what information they're putting out, or what things they're putting out. Let's just put it that way, so I won't be in judgment of anything one way or the other.
Like I've mentioned on several podcasts, it's the filter.
So the many of the decision makers, many of the people that are influencing, have an agenda of sorts. And I'm not saying that in a negative sense, but they have an agenda. And so they have motivation to make sure that the messages are framed a certain way, because it supports their position and helps protect their position, figuratively and literally. So the question that comes to my mind is, I believe in the ability of man. I believe in the goodness of enough men and women, and I say that term in a generic sense, of people, humanity, to fight against those things that are not right. Let's just say. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying they're not right.
Yeah.
That are not for the greater good, so to speak. But there are those that don't play that way, so to speak. So I'm struggle with how that cycle can be broken or influenced in a way that is constructive, right? That doesn't, as I said earlier, leave a trail of destruction behind. I mean, there's fight it head on, right? And we see this a lot in a lot of public debates that go on, right? It becomes not let's find common ground to settle the differences. It becomes let's head on fight and see who's got the most might. And it hasn't. And in some cases, we're seeing in some of the cities the things that are going on physically. But I think when you're talking about leaders and not just politicians, but they tend to be the loudest and the most vocal. It tends to be about muscle and might and influence. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in a quandary in thinking, what can we do? And I know I started off this discussion today where we left off about we can do the things in our space. But what are those? What are some examples of those that you think? Because I think that's a grassroots, fundamental area where a difference can be made.
Sure. So, I guess it depends on what difference in what when you frame that, or when you're asking that question, because you're very broad with that, because some things maybe don't need to be addressed, but right. Maybe some things need to be addressed in a very narrow manner, not in their totality, right? So what do you mean when you ask that question?
Okay, so most of the time, most people, and whether it be on social media, dialogue that's going on back and forth, it gets very contentious very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. Right. And people tend to try to create their own echo chambers. That's not what they're trying. I mean, I don't think they're consciously trying to do that, right. But that's what they're looking for, people that say the same thing. Right. And then every so often someone will intervene, innocently maybe, and maybe not so innocently at times. And then they sort of create a conflict. Now, sometimes that might be the objective, right? To keep things stirred up for whatever reason, who knows? But my question is, how should one create a dialogue with someone that definitely believes differently on a point to get to a rational conversation and discussion about how to reconcile?
Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Glad, yes, I'm glad that's where you took it, because my answer is going to probably be surprising to you. Don't. You can't. You won't. That's the problem. That's the crux of the problem. You're looking at it from a different angle, so it feels like it's a different question to you, but it's the same question of, you're not going to save the world. You're not going to change the world. But in giving up the attempt to change the world, you just might change the world. That's what's it's paradoxical. But my point being is that you can only focus on yourself. You can only control yourself. You can only change and improve yourself. You will never be able to do that on another. And whenever the second that you begin to even think about externalizing that is the second you've lost in this. You can't do that, because then you're no different at that. And no matter how altruistic, good, well-intentioned you are, you're the same as someone who's trying to assert their will on someone else. Your will is for you and you alone. You have free will. You have free will over yourself, not over everything. And when people try to assert their own will upon others, is where that is the last snowflake that causes the avalanche. And it feels so right, and it feels so positive, and it's all good intention. And I know that that's true from probably everybody that, well, not everybody, but 90 whatever percent of people really honestly think that they're doing the right thing. But really what they're doing is they're causing their own damnation. And I mean that literally. It's like all this stuff in the Bible, everybody wants to take it so literally. And if you want to, that's fine. I'm not trying to decry that or talk down on that at all. I think that's a separate issue if you want to take it literally. I take it very metaphorically, that when you try to externalize your own personal power, that's when you start on the road to hell. That's what the temptation of Jesus is in the desert by Satan. Because all Satan's trying to do is trying to get Jesus to externalize his power, right? Is to give it to Satan. No, he has to retain it. It's again one of those paradoxical things that if Jesus were to have given Satan his power in that story, he literally would have never been Jesus. And that is the real takeaway here for me, from my perspective, is that you cannot even think that you will ever be able to come to an accord with someone who has, one, such a radically different position, and two, isn't obviously asking and searching and looking for something, or looking for a different path. I won't say a better path, but a different path.
Mm-hmm. You know, that also reminds me of another piece of scripture from the Bible in the New Testament as well. And I can't recall exactly where it is, but two of the disciples were I think they were talking to Jesus, and he was telling them about going out. And he said, when you go into their community, in their home, and you knock on the door, and if they don't open and welcome you, and they turn you away, he says you should turn and leave and knock the dust of that ground off of your feet. Mm-hmm. Basically, which is sort of a more direct way to say what you just articulated, right? Because they're not reaching out for that, and if they're not open and receptive, don't fight that battle. Turn your back; it's on them. And that makes it sort of the struggle between good and evil, and I think that's fine, because I think that's, in some respect, what how can we characterize what you said too.
There's also an interesting symbolic reversal of that same point in vampire mythology, that a vampire can't cross your threshold unless you invite him in. It's the same thing. You have to invite the evil in. And so the second that you give that up and you try to say, I'm going to change this person's mind or change this person's, all that kind of stuff, is the second you invite the evil in. And then it becomes a vampire and sucks your soul out of you through your blood. It sucks your life blood out of you. And so you have invited the evil in, and the evil is going to kill you. It's all metaphorical, man. Everything in this life is metaphorical, but especially stories. It's so funny how everything like that all relates together, and it's all the same thing. The message is, focus on yourself. Make yourself the best person you can be. Improve yourself. Strive for perfection. You're never going to hit perfection, but the whole idea is you can always be better than you are. You can always be better than you are. And the more that you focus on yourself and try to make yourself better, the more you will open your eyes and be like, whoa, things around me are changing. Things are getting better. The people in my life are getting better. Everything's getting better. And so it gives you this weird sense that you are controlling everything. And that's what I mean by, if you give up the pursuit to try to save the world, you may actually save the world that's around you, that you can see, that you actually interact with.
The cynic might say, oh, sure, Jordan, what you're talking about is just be totally selfish. And I know that's not what you meant at all. No. You were talking about focusing on your best self, which makes you better prepared and better able to meet the needs of those around you, whatever that may manifest itself meaning.
But that's part of making yourself better. You make yourself better by bearing more responsibility for the travesty of life. that you take it on your shoulders. You do this, right? You take on your own life. You have to take care of yourself. There's physically no other way. But once you get to that point that you're able to do that for yourself, then you see what other responsibility you can take on and say, well, I can do that too. Let me put that on my shoulder. Well, I can do that too. Let me put that on my shoulder. And the more and more that you do that, you're continuing to make yourself better, and you're literally making the world better by doing that. You're putting more opportunity in front of people. You're putting more opportunity in front of yourself, but you're raising up things that aren't able to be raised by themselves, or at least aren't being raised by themselves. And it's making everything better. It has nothing to do with being selfish. And I would challenge anyone who thinks that it has anything to do with being selfish to try to adopt a completely altruistic perspective on everything that they do. One, like when I say altruistic, I mean like literally complete denial of self for everything else. What you're going to find is one of two things. One, it's going to be impossible for you to move that on completely. Or two, that you are so fulfilled by doing that you didn't realize that was your own personal path to redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, everybody thinks that everybody has to do it the same way, and it's not. That's not how it works out. If everybody did it the same way, it'd be a boring world, right? That's like if we all like the same things, or if we all, listen to the same music or read the same books, it would all be super boring. It would just be one thing everywhere,
Right.
And literally, sorry, this is a real tangent, and this is the most opportune time to say this because I really think I have to say this. My philosophy on life is very weird to a lot of people, but it's not to some people. I have a very Eastern flavor to some of what I believe. The whole idea that we are all one, I 100% believe that. And that's part of the reason why focusing on yourself is not selfish, because we are all part of one spirit. We all are part of the Spirit of God. I truly believe this. And that's why the most effective action we can take for improving things in this world is to improve ourselves. But that helps to improve everybody else. That's why everything appears to be better the more that we improve ourselves. And if everybody did that, man, just think about where things would go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It'd be amazing.
I know. That sounds a little unusual, talking about the Eastern view of things. But I think the way you describe it and couch it, it stays very consistent with the Western, Judeo-Christian perspective on things. It's just some of the fundamentalists would take exception because they're absolute, strict literalists, right?
Sure.
And I think that's because it makes it easier for people to believe, right?
Yeah.
Believe certain.
There's utility in that.
Yeah, let me just be absolute that it's this way. I don't have to worry about understanding it. I don't have to understand the greater picture. I don't have to dig in deep and understand, all these things. I can just accept it on the face value. And there's nothing, as you said, there's nothing wrong with those kinds of approaches, as long as it affects the goal and objective of the better life, the perfect. We're striving for a perfect life and improving the world around you accordingly. But what I think it does do is it limits people into their way of thinking about what's going on around them too, right?
Sure.
I think a lot of the conservatives and fundamentalists in the Judeo-Christian world, they tend to want to have more separation from them and their beliefs in the world, and I don't think that's why God put us here, was to be that kind of pull away. We need to be separate from the world and our beliefs, but we have to live in the world, and we have to your point. I think it's all about making the world better by how we've made ourselves better. That's deep, and I'm swimming in the deep, and it's making my head spin because it's challenging some of my frames of understanding. Right.
And that you did not create yourself. That's the thing. You didn't create that. And that's that goes back to the whole social media thing, and the whatever frame is the entrenched power structure setting the frame is because that in and of itself is a limitation on human achievement broadly. Speaking beyond just spirituality, is a limitation on human achievement. And it is necessarily so, because those entrenched power structures, if they weren't asserting that frame, the explosive engine of human creativity and ingenuity would destroy any control and entrenchment that they have in all of human society. So that's literally what they're trying to do, is they're trying to retard progress so that they can maintain this frame. Right, and it's not like design, right? That sounds very conspiracy theory. And I don't mean that in a people are sitting in a dark room and smoking pipes and like, how are we going to keep it? It's not like that. It's because of think about it like evolution. Our society and our economy and our all the interaction of human life itself is like an organism, and so it's evolving. And so this frame setting mechanism that the entrenched power structures have is like a vestigial limb that hasn't been evolved away yet. And so it's still there, and it's slowing down progress because we're having to drag this thing around with us. But it won't be long before we evolve that away. I really believe it won't be that long before we evolve that away. And I say that long, 50 years, 100 years, something like that. And then human society is going to become something different. But again, I think social media is like the real indication that that's the path we took, right? And the internet's the thing that started it, and it could have gone a couple ways, and it went down the path where, okay, this is going to become human life now. It's strange, I know, but so.
Oh, no, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, my real point being, one of the things that I wanted to go back to say though, you had mentioned about being separated from the world or whatever. In the scripture in the Bible where it says, "Be in the world, but not of the world."
Right.
All that's speaking to is that same thing about the vampire thing and the evil and inviting it in, is that you need to be in that world, right? Because you have to be the one who's shouldering the burden of the world, right? You have to take that forward and do that work, so to speak. And so you have to be there. But what you don't have to do is say, well, now that I'm here, I'm going to also, be convinced that I got to do this, think your way too. And I've got to think that way too. And I've got to figure out how these things fit together. No. You have to be focused on the life you're trying to build, right? And that life that you're trying to build is one that is going to, in business terms, bring the most value to all of the people around you. But in philosophical terms, it's shouldering as much responsibility as you can. Yeah, so I think that's a real good place to try to wrap this up. We had a little bit of a cut there, you probably noticed, but real life happens when real life happens.
Sure, absolutely.
So, I've talked to you about this offline before, Doyle, and these are the kind of things that I could talk about forever. I like everything in my mental map. Everything relates to everything else through this kind of structure around. And this is the pivotal point of all the things that kind of flow through my mind. And it's how I'm trying to continue to align my life. It's a relatively recent thing for me to really be intentional about trying to align it in that way. And so it's still difficult for me to do the things that I speak. And so I feel a little bit out of line saying the things that I'm saying, but it's one of those things that I know it's true. It's like it's such a huge resonance within me that I know I understand this as truth, right? The same way that we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? That's exactly how this is for me, that I hold this to be self-evident. Because if you think about it, and I think that maybe to you it's kind of seems true as well, because it makes sense and resonates with your experience in life and how things have been for you. So I don't want to come off as like high and mighty, because like this is something that I struggle with every day, trying to make sure that this is what I'm doing as well. And I think that that's the way that it always is. But as long as we have that intention to grapple with life in that way, I think that we will make a lot of progress toward things that we really want to see in the world.
If our view and vision wasn't better or farther than we are now, what kind of a view or vision would it be? So I think what you're saying is you're speaking of the vision and the force that's pulling you forward, right? Which sometimes is a struggle, right? Because of, as we talked about, we're not of the world, but we're in the world. And so we have to fight those struggles, whatever they might be, in personally. And I don't mean external. I'm talking about personally, and to become better, so that we can fulfill that vision that you've articulated and we've been discussing here. Because I think that's the way it is. I mean, I got to make a speech when I was in high school at my graduation, and I ended the speech with a quote from Robert Browning. It says, "A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for?" And to me, that is so appropriate, so apropos for this particular topic right here, because it's really so exactly the same thing. I think that's what he was talking about, that we should strive farther than we think we can reach and grasp, right? We should reach farther than that. Sorry, I don't mean to be reaching into the camera, but we need to push ourselves, right? And then I think that's what you're talking about, is that push becomes the improvement, becomes the strive toward perfection. And that is never attainable, but we can always continue in that path, right? Moving that direction. So yeah, it's very motivating for me, and I appreciate the insights and the growth that it has permitted me to feel like I've gotten to make here today as a result of that. So thank you for that. That has been not just enjoyable as they always are, but this one I think is even more fundamentally beneficial to me personally. So,
well, I'm happy to have some small impact for sure.
Absolutely. It's kind of what you said, right? As you're making yourself better, you're making the world around you better. And I feel like your attempts to do that have influenced me without trying to influence me, without trying to improve me, right? And I think that's a great example. I won't say it's a great example, but I think that's a small example of the concept that you've been describing and espousing here today. So, and I have before too. It's not the first time you've mentioned. So, all right, Jordan. As always, man, these things are great. I truly hope that people besides you and I get something out of them as we've put this out on the internet. I think there's value there if people will stop and listen and not hear it's because it's us, but to hear it because we think that we're trying to echo truths that we know, and as we've entitled this little discussion, things I got to say. I think that's pretty profound in some respects, that we feel the burn of having to get things out and share and hope that they're going to make things better for everyone around us that maybe is within earshot of them.
Absolutely. Well, Dwell, I appreciate you taking the time as always.
Sure. Until we meet again.
All right.
Good day.
Good. See ya.
All right. See ya.